have a distinct memory as a kid of one of those experiments that they do in science class with a magnet. On the one side, you put that magnet down and all these metal balls would be attracted to it and clumped together. But if you turn that same magnet over, all those same little balls would be pushed by individual forces away from the magnet and away from each other. These last few months have reminded me of that science experiment from long ago. For months, we have been isolated from one another, keeping our distance, staying inside. Maybe that is, at least in part, why these last 2 weeks have affected me so much. After all this isolation, we have come back together, not in the carefully calibrated, phased reopening that scientists and governors recommended, but like a mass of tiny steel balls unable to contain their irresistible attraction to one another any longer. This push and pull, this attraction and distance, is in fact the way that classical theologians describe the Holy Trinity. God, the very ground of our being, has been described across the millennia as actually both existing as an eternal dynamic tension and also as a complete and unified whole. The image of the Trinity that we have in the ambulatory is the classical representation of the persons of the Trinity: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But if you read a little deeper, the real image of the Trinity is not one that we find on the ambulatory. It's actually a shield. And that shield exists with each corner: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And on the outer edge they are joined by a banner, non est, or is not, depicting their individuality. The Father is not the Son is not the Spirit, but each is connected to the center, which is God, or Deus, with the word est. The Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit is God. That is the mystery. How can God be both three and one, distinct and yet singular? Justo Gonzalez, director of the Hispanic Theological Initiative at Emory University, says that some people approach the Trinity like it was a crossword puzzle. And he says, the Trinity is a mystery, not a puzzle. Love is a mystery. A crossword is a puzzle. You try to solve the puzzle. You stand in awe of the mystery. The gospel today is the Great Commission, in which we are called to go out and make disciples of all the nations of the world. It is, of course, the church's call to make disciples, to spread the good news, to baptize and preach. But I want to point out that the reading is coupled with the reading from Genesis about how God created the earth. It walks us through one of the most basic understanding that Jews, Christians, and Muslims share about our understanding of God and the world. God created the world and all that is in it, and that creation is good. The light, the stars, the land, the sea, the plants, the animals, and every day God looks at that creation and sees that it is good. Until verse 27 of the first chapter, there's a fragment of a verse. It's actually punctuated differently in the text to imply that it is a quotation. Some biblical scholars believe this to be a fragment of a verse from an older Hebrew tradition. It reads, "So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." This is the first creation story. It precedes the story about Adam and Eve, and as the first story in the Bible, it is the presumptive story about the creation of the world. It is strange to me that we do not spend more time talking about these verses, because they posit a creation of the world that was designed with equality in mind. Men and women were created at the same time, and each contained the image of God. And God blessed them and said that they were good. Men and women, regardless of race, ethnicity, language, class, or religion, we all bear upon us the image of God. Like that ancient picture of the Trinity, we are not all the same, but each one of us bears the likeness of our Creator. Once upon a time, a man was put in a dark cave. He was sentenced to die in that cave unless he could find his way out. The cave was 100 yards by 100 yards, and he was told that there really was a way out. The cave was sealed by a very large rock, and after the cave was sealed, the prisoner was allowed to take off his blindfold. In the midst of the darkness, he walked around the cave. He had food, but only bread and water, which would last for 30 days. That food was lowered to him from a hole in the ceiling, which was about 18 feet high. The opening was only 1 foot in diameter. The man investigated the cave and soon discovered that there was a pile of rocks. He quickly determined that if he could build up the pile of rocks even higher, perhaps he could escape through that hole. By calculating both his height and his reach, he believed that he needed to build the mound 10 feet high. Every moment was devoted to finding rocks and placing them in that pile. After 2 weeks, he had built the mound to about 6 feet, and he figured that over the next 2 weeks, he could complete the task before the food would run out. But he hadn't taken into account that he had already used up most of the rocks in the cave. He would have to use the rocks that were left and certainly more dirt, and he had nothing to dig with but his bare hands. After the next 2 weeks had passed, he had only built the mound to 9.5 feet. He thought maybe he could reach the opening if he were to jump. At this point, he was near exhaustion, and as he tried to jump and reach the opening, he fell. He was too weak to get up and try again, and in 2 days, he had died. When they came to remove his body from the cave, they removed the large stone that had covered the entrance, and the light poured in and revealed everything. In the light, it was evident that there was an opening in the wall of the cave at ground level. The hole in the wall was the beginning of a tunnel that traveled for 200 feet and led to freedom. The captured man had so focused on the opening above that he never thought that there could be another way out of the cave. The opening was right next to the mound that he had been building. The trouble was that the opening on the ground level was in the darkness, and it didn't seem possible to him. I'm afraid that we find ourselves in a situation like that right now. We are so afraid that we cannot build a wall high enough or solve problems that seem to us to be impossible. That we have forgotten some basic things, that we are, all of us, brothers and sisters, made in the image of God, in need of one another's kindness and compassion, of our ability to listen and to hear one another's pain and experience. And we need most especially our hearts, and we need to trust that our hearts have the ability to grow. The problems that we face are not puzzles. They are mysteries that require our love and respect. God is indeed a mystery, both a relationship between equals that exists only because of love. And we are made in that image, designed to function together as one, always in a creative tension between identifying as selves and existing as a whole. And that is perfect, holy, like the God who created us. As it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be forever. Amen.